CW contains scenes of kidnapping and abuse. You don't get to decide how your life changes. Not really, anyway. You can't plan or prepare for it. 1 minute, everything feels normal, almost boring, and then, in an instant, it's gone. Just like that, your world, your safety, and the sense of control you thought you had all vanish into thin air. My name is Emily. I'm writing this because I don't want anyone else to fall into the same trap I did. It seems that you can't show any compassion anymore, or else it ends up biting you. I know I'm supposed to be thankful that I made it out alive, and I am. But sometimes every part of me feels like I'm still back there, stuck in that place. I need to get this off my chest, and more importantly, out of my mind. Who knows? Maybe my story will help somebody out there. Don't think you're safe just because it's a nice day, or because you're walking in a familiar neighborhood. That's how it always starts. If you've watched enough crime documentaries as I have, you know they begin with something small, something so unremarkable that it almost feels weird to call it the beginning. I was too naive to see it at the time, and that nearly cost me my life. It was a typical Thursday in Eastern Virginia. I had been working my ass off trying to finish my online degree, so I thought I would get out and take a walk across town. I figured the fresh air would do me some good. That afternoon felt calm and ordinary, just like any other day. I admired the first signs of fall beginning to show along the path. Sunlight warmed the cracked pavement, while red and orange leaves drifted down, crunching under my steps. My mind wandered, free from any concern. I started to think about what I wanted to do for dinner. I thought about making something simple, like pasta, or even picking up a pizza. There was no rush. The town was quiet and still, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of a leaf blower in the crisp autumn air. I wasn't on alert. I didn't think I needed to be. Looking back, I still wonder if things would have turned out differently if I had been walking by that spot 5 minutes earlier or later. Perhaps things would have turned out differently, and I wouldn't be sharing this story with you. I almost stopped at the corner store for a soda, but kept walking, telling myself I didn't need the empty calories. As I moved on, the warm scent of cinnamon filled the air, followed by something else. The smell was so tantalizing that it immediately piqued my curiosity. Glancing over the fence that separated the store from the yard behind it, I spotted the source of the wonderful smell. It was Mrs. Landry's house. There, on the windowsill of her kitchen, sat 3 perfectly crafted pies, each releasing the mouth-watering scent of apples and spice. I closed my eyes, letting the fragrance wash over me, and for a moment, I thought to myself that this could nearly be the perfect day. It wasn't just close to it. It was perfect, until I heard the hum of a car approaching from behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured it was just another car passing by, likely another stranger in a hurry, probably heading home from work, or squeezing in a few errands before dark. Just as I had pushed it to the back of my mind, I heard the engine ease back. The brakes gave a sharp, brief screech as the car slowed to a near stop beside me. I should have just kept walking, pretending I hadn't noticed. Instead, I stopped and turned as the car came to a final, sharp halt next to me. The car didn't look like much at first. Just a beat-up old sedan from the late 90s, or early 2000s. It was the kind you stop noticing after seeing 1,000 of them. But the longer I looked, the stranger and more out of place it felt. The fading gray paint was chipped and scabbed over with rust, worn down by years of neglect. A fresh dent marred the front bumper, sharp and out of place. As if it had struck something recently, the windows were tinted just enough to hide whoever was inside, though the driver's side was slightly cracked open, as if the air within had grown too thick for them to breathe. The tires were mismatched and worn nearly bald, yet somehow still holding together under the car's weight. The headlights were dim, emitting a sickly yellow glow that flickered every few seconds, like they were struggling to stay lit. Even the engine sputtered unevenly, with each dying cough sounding like it was fighting for its last breath. As I studied the strange car, the passenger window suddenly jerked to life, grinding and squealing as it inched its way down. It finally came to a stop, leaving a narrow opening into the dark, stale interior. From the shadowed gap, the upper half of the driver slowly came into view. Curious as to what they wanted, I hesitantly leaned toward the cracked window, trying to get a look at the person behind the wheel. A dark silhouette of a man emerged, leaning toward me across the passenger seat. From the looks of him, I guessed that he was a middle-aged man, maybe 40 or 50, with long, greasy black hair slicked back across his scalp, like he hadn't washed in months. His face was gaunt and unnervingly pale, as if he hadn't stepped into sunlight in years. His skin looked almost artificial, like Halloween makeup left on for way too long. He tilted his head downward, his gaze dropping until our eyes met. Up until that moment, I hadn't been especially cautious, but the instant I looked into his eyes, fear struck me like a hammer on cold steel. They weren't dark or light, but more so empty, strangely vacant, like they shouldn't belong to a real person. He stared at me, wide-eyed and unblinking, studying me as intensely as I was him. After a few agonizing seconds, he smiled. This seemingly friendly gesture unnerved me even more. It wasn't the kind of polite smile you'd give a stranger you just met on the street. It was too wide, too eager. His lips curled around his face, stretching so far that it seemed they might tear at the corners, stopping just short of it. It was as if he was trying to mask something behind the bizarre display, something that he didn't want me to see. "You need a ride?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost pleasant. If it weren't for how sharp my senses had become, I might have considered him to be a nice guy just trying to help me out. But something about him put me on edge. I could physically feel my skin crawling under my jacket. The sound of his voice, the way his mouth moved when he spoke, the car he drove. It all screamed danger in my head, but I foolishly gave him the benefit of the doubt. I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't like me talking to strangers, let alone getting into a car with one. Something about that moment held me in place. I was speechless, but my mind wouldn't slow down. It felt like I was stuck in a bubble with this guy. And though I couldn't name the feeling, it clawed at me deep from within my gut, telling me something was wrong here. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head, hoping that would be enough. He didn't move. He just kept staring at me, smile never faltering. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm not going that far. Just a little drive. I can take you wherever you need to go on the way." I could feel my heart thundering in my chest. There was something so fundamentally and disturbingly wrong with this situation that I had begun to plead with myself to leave. Why I chose to continue standing there will forever haunt and confuse me. One part of my brain clung to caution, urging me to run or get away in whatever way possible. The other part, the curious side, was unfortunately the one winning the battle. My feet remained glued to the sidewalk, and I just stood there, staring back at his lifeless eyes. I should have run or done something, but I just stood there. Instead of doing the obvious thing, I chose to respond to him. "No, I'm fine, really," I said. My voice cracked with nervousness. His bizarre grin fell for the briefest moment, as if he were disappointed, but quickly returned before I could even blink, stretching even wider as if he were forcing it. "Come on," he pressed. "I'm not a bad guy. It'll just be a short ride. No harm in it. You look like you could use a break anyhow." There was a part of me, a part that I hate now, that felt compelled to respond. As stupid as it sounds, it insisted that I remain polite, as if I owed him an answer. Swallowing my growing fear, I spoke. "I'm fine," I said again, trying my best to make my voice as confident and intimidating as I could, though inside I was anything but. I took a step backward, my feet moving almost instinctually. He didn't flinch from my act. He just sat there with his eyes locked onto mine. It felt like I was caught in a staring contest, the stakes of which were getting higher by the second. For a moment, a deafening silence settled between us, only broken by the soft click of the passenger door unlocking. It was barely louder than a whisper, but it was enough to send me into pure panic. My heart jumped in my chest, and my body froze solidly in place. The door creaked open as he pushed it outward, revealing the torn, ragged seat inside. "Please," he said softly, his voice unnervingly calm. "I just want to help you." It was like he was trying to coax a frightened animal into approaching him, pressing ever so gently, seeing what he could get away with. Looking back, I could strangle myself for not just running away, or yelling, or doing something other than standing there. Instead, I decided to do something I had never done before and haven't done again since. I chose to stand my ground, hoping that seeing me push back would deter him. Asterisk, I took another step back, trying to slow my spinning mind. My breathing quickened, and my hands began to tremble as I planted myself on the sidewalk. I had seen this type of stuff in TV shows, but I never thought I would ever have to live it. Asterisk, my resolve crumbled in an instant, replaced by suffocating panic. One moment, I was telling myself to stand my ground, but it was quickly washed away by my overwhelming instinct telling me to run. I quickly turned, tensing my calves for a push-off down the street. I planned to run as fast as I could, yelling as loudly as I could until I reached the corner store, where I knew I would be safe. Before I could make another move, I heard his voice tear through the air, booming in my ears. Asterisk, don't make me chase you, he snarled with gritted teeth. Asterisk, he now stood outside his car, staring at me with the cold focus of a predator daring its prey to run. Asterisk, I froze, my brain stifling any urge I had to move. Time seemed to slow down dramatically. Seconds felt like hours as his words swirled around my mind. The looming threat of what would happen to me if I tried to run held me firmly in place. Asterisk, maybe it was the fear or the way his words clung to my mind, but I couldn't move. I forced myself to look into his eyes again, desperately searching for some small glint of weakness, anything to assure me that he wasn't going to hurt me. What I saw instead made my stomach turn. This wasn't just a man in a car. He wasn't just a stranger asking for company. This was something else entirely. There was something in his eyes, something deep that I couldn't place. But it told me with a chilling certainty I would die if I tried to run. Asterisk, before I could even register it, he had lunged around the back of the car and was quickly running toward me. By the time I reacted, he was already stepping onto the sidewalk. Asterisk, I ran back toward the corner store as fast as I could. I could hear his shoes slapping the pavement as he chased me, gaining on me with each frantic step. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could get a sound out, his hand shot out in front of me, covering my nose and mouth with a thick white rag. A sharp chemical smell filled my nose, stinging my sinuses. Asterisk, I tried to pull away, but his hands held it tightly to my face. Asterisk, let go of me, I shouted, my voice muffled to nearly nothing by the rag. I kicked and thrashed, but his grip was like iron. His fingers dug into my ribs and arms, and his body pressed against me as he yanked me backwards, dragging me down the street and shoving me into the passenger seat. Asterisk, you're going to be fine, he whispered in my ear, his breath hot against my neck. I'm going to take you to a safe place. Asterisk, the thick, noxious scent flooded my throat, choking me from the inside out. I tried to fight it with everything I had, knowing that if he got me into the car, I was done for. Though I gave everything I had, my muscles betrayed me, losing strength almost immediately as he pushed me onto the seat. Asterisk, the next few moments were a blur. My vision spun around me like a vortex, faster and faster, until everything began to tilt and dim. The world shrank to fragments, slowly retreating, giving way to blackness. I could feel his ragged, eager breathing on my neck as the sound of the car's dying engine filled my ears, followed by the echoing thud of the passenger door closing behind him. The dark shape of his face hovered above mine, grinning down on me as my vision faded further. Asterisk, my eyes rolled back, barely holding focus. I caught a glimpse of something metallic in his hand as my head rolled around the headrest. The world smeared into streaks, blurring into a mixture of light and dark. I tried with everything I had left to push myself away, but the darkness rushed up too fast, pulling me down with it. Asterisk, as my vision fell to black, I felt cold, sharp metal pushing into my throat. Asterisk, go to sleep now. I don't need any surprises, he said, his words warbling in my ears as my body finally gave in to a deep, paralyzing sleep. Abusive content. When I finally awoke, it wasn't gentle. It was violent and sudden, as my consciousness snapped back into reality. Air rushed into my lungs in a single desperate gasp. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I struggled to breathe, scrambling to keep pace with my panicked thoughts. My body felt heavy, as if some invisible force were pinning me down. Asterisk for a moment, I thought I was still in the car. But as my senses slowly returned, I could see that this situation was far worse. I was in a basement, or at least that's what it felt like. The place was incredibly dark, almost pitch black. The only light came from a single bulb dangling overhead, flickering as if it were barely getting any power. Asterisk, I blinked hard, trying to clear the haze from my vision. When I tried lifting my hand to rub my eyes, something jerked it back down, stopping it about a foot from my face. I looked down to see what had caught me, still blinking away the haze. I could see something blurry and indistinguishable wrapped around my wrist. I looked down at my other hand, noticing that it was caught in the same way. Asterisk, as my vision sharpened, the blurry shapes resolved, and the realization hit me, sending a fresh surge of panic through my already tattered mind. Asterisk, my wrists were shackled with heavy chains. Thick iron links held me fast against the brick wall at my back. The metal pulled so tight it cut into my skin, crushing any chance I thought I had of breaking free. I yanked and struggled anyway, desperate and shaking, only to feel the chains bite down harder. With each attempt, the unforgiving metal bit down, tearing off strips of skin, leaving thin streams of blood trailing down the brick and onto the cold concrete floor. Asterisk, I eventually stopped fighting, letting the chains go slack as I tried to conserve what little energy I had left. I rested my head against the cold brick, feeling the adrenaline drain away and my senses creeping back one by one. That's when the smell hit me. Asterisk, a putrid, rotting stench permeated the air, heavy with mildew and a dampness that clung to everything, including my skin. It crawled up the back of my throat, forcing me to gag, but I swallowed it down, not daring to make a sound. Asterisk, I had no idea where I was, or whether he was still nearby, but I wasn't going to give him a reason to come back. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, I was alone for now. Asterisk, swallowing back the intense urge to vomit, I let my eyes drift across the room, scanning every fetid inch of the place. I noticed a slot in the wall next to me. The doors were made of metal, rusted and weathered by time, but they seemed as though they had been used recently. It wasn't large, maybe only concealing a foot of space behind him. I figured it was probably a chute for his dirty laundry. From the looks of the place, it wouldn't have surprised me in the least. Asterisk, squinting through the dim light, my eyes caught something across the room. There was a door on the far wall. It was old, made of wood that was splintering at the edges, like it had been petrified down there. The panels sagged unevenly, warped and streaked with mold. Asterisk, a thick, black fungus clung to the base, traveling upward through the grain, like veins through flesh. Deep gouges marred the lower half, as if something hard and sharp had struck it repeatedly. Asterisk, it didn't take long for me to realize that this door might be the source of my salvation and my damnation. Asterisk, it couldn't have been but a couple of minutes before the sound of heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. My eyes snapped back to the door as adrenaline-soaked panic tore through me, raising every hair on my skin. Asterisk, I couldn't see him yet, but I could feel him. A dark, foreboding presence pressed in closer with each echoing step. Asterisk, I barely had time to sit up before the door creaked open, and he stepped into the room. My skin crawled the moment I saw him, his face still wearing that same sick, curling smile. His clothes were the same, ragged and stained, but his eyes were sharper now, bright with what looked like an eager anticipation. like he'd been waiting for this particular moment his entire life. His gaze slowly rolled over me, assessing his prize. Asterisk seemingly satisfied with what he saw. He spoke. Asterisk. Good. You're awake, he said, his voice relaxed and calm, as if this were a completely normal conversation. Asterisk, I was starting to worry you wouldn't wake up. But you seemed like a tough one. I figured you'd come around. You've got some fight in you, Emily. I like that in a woman. Asterisk hearing my name slide off his lips made me want to vomit. He had taken everything from me, including my name. I wanted to curse, fight, anything, but I couldn't. My mouth was so dry that it had tightened my throat, preventing my vocal cords from functioning. My chest felt shallow, my lungs still straining to pull in enough air to breathe properly. I could do nothing but glare at him, my words stuck somewhere between my mind and my mouth. Don't bother struggling, he said, looking down at me like he could read my thoughts. You're not going anywhere. Not yet, anyhow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small knife, holding it up in front of me to make sure I saw it. My breath caught in my throat as he took a step closer. The dim light skimmed across the blade, sending a sharp pain through my head. It wasn't large, but he handled it with such casual ease that my whole body trembled in fear. He twirled it between his fingers effortlessly, like a familiar toy. I could feel the intensity grow in the room with every movement. You see, Emily, he continued, his voice low and smooth, I don't really like to hurt people, but when they don't listen, and especially when they're difficult, they need to be put back in line. Understand? He stepped closer, then crouched down until his eyes were level with mine. My heart hammered in my chest as I instinctively pulled against the chains, trying to push myself as far away from him as I could get. Please, I silently begged in my mind. Please, no. I wanted to shout, but the words stayed locked inside me. I was completely trapped. His smile widened as he lowered the blade from my face. I'm going to be kind to you. I promise I am, he said, staring into my eyes. But you're going to need to learn. You're going to have to understand how things work around here. I flinched as he suddenly rose, his fingers grazing my cheek on the way up. It was the gentlest touch, but in my mind, it felt like a razor blade dragging across my skin. My body screamed to pull away, but I could barely move. He reached out and cupped my jaw, forcing my head to tilt upward. His face hovered inches from mine, so close that I could see every detail in his face. His skin, so sickly pale, looked as if it had been completely drained of all warmth. Thin, purple veins snaked across his temples and neck, pulsing subtly as if some alien fluid flowed through them. Worst of all, his cracked, colorless lips twisted upward into that same grotesque, misshapen smile, sending waves of nausea across my stomach. Though I badly wanted to, I dared not look away. I was frozen in terror, forced to stare into his soulless eyes. He pulled back slightly, grinning with amusement. I don't hurt the ones who make it easy, he said softly. But when they make it hard, well, that just makes it a little more fun for me. I felt my stomach twist as his words slithered around my mind like a parasite, digging in to feed on my fear. The knife in his hand caught the dim light, glinting sharply across my face. A cold, silent reminder of what would happen if I didn't obey. Suddenly, he lunged forward. I barely had time to register his movement before a hot, searing pain ripped across my cheek. The blade sank in, carving a line of fire through my skin. I could feel the warm blood beginning to flow across my cheek in thick, sticky rivulets, slowly rolling down my neck and onto my shirt. I gasped, my eyes wide in shock. He was just there, the blade slicing through my skin so fast, so effortlessly that I couldn't have stopped it if I wanted to. Blood pooled in my mouth, thick and metallic, as it flowed down my face. I summoned everything within me, to keep from gagging, fighting to stay calm and bury the pain. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Smiling widely, he stepped back to admire his handwork. "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" he asked sarcastically. "It's just a little cut. It'll heal. In a few days, you won't even remember it." He was right. The sharp, throbbing pain in my cheek was already fading beneath something far worse. The creeping realization that this was only the beginning settled heavily in my mind. If this was not so bad, I couldn't begin to imagine what he would do to someone who made it difficult. "Now," he said, looking down at the blood on his fingers, "let's see how long it takes for you to learn." He casually pulled out a white handkerchief from his pocket and began wiping my blood from his blade and hands before tucking it away again. I wanted to scream or to fight, but I couldn't. It wouldn't do any good anyway. The chains were too tight, and my body was already trembling too hard to be of any use to me. Sheer and absolute terror rooted me in place. "Please," I whispered, my voice crackling and weak. "Please don't do this to me." He stood there, motionless, staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. For a moment, maybe a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something shift behind them. I noticed the slightest flicker of humanity spark within him, but just as quickly as it had shone, it vanished, swallowed by the vast, empty darkness he had become. "I'm going to take good care of you, Emily," he said, his voice soft once again. "You just need to learn your place, and it will all be fine." It sounded gentle, but I could hear the darkness behind it, the threat buried underneath. I now knew what he was capable of. I'd seen the way his eyes darkened the moment the knife appeared. I saw the way he looked at me, not like a person, but like a thing, something to be broken, twisted. I eventually lost track of time. It could have been days, or maybe weeks. I stopped counting early on. I used hunger to keep my mind off the time that it relentlessly gnawed at me. My body begged for food or water, or literally anything to remind me that I was still alive. The man, whose name I still didn't know, came in and out sporadically, never staying for too long, but always keeping an eye on me. When he chose to speak, it was always deliberate. Every word was cryptic and measured. His voice slid along the walls, quiet and cold, sinking into the back of my mind. "I'm just making you into something better," he repeated again and again, as though repetition could absolve him, or convince himself the lie was no less monstrous than the truth. As much as he said it, I could never understand what it meant. Better how? Better for what? What did he even mean by that? When he first bound me in the chains, I convinced myself that it was just a temporary thing. He couldn't keep me here forever, right? He had to let me go eventually. Or, I thought, maybe somebody would come looking for me, and at any minute they'd bust down the door and find me. At the very least, I figured that if he meant to kill me, he would have done it long before now. That gave me hope, albeit very little. As the days passed, the old wooden door opened less frequently. It felt like I was being tested, like a rat in a cage being dared to break free. Every time I worked up the courage to scream or pound on the walls, the only response I'd get was a low, amused laugh. "Such a fighter. You remind me of someone," he'd say, almost fondly. But he never elaborated. He never said anything that suggested I would ever make it out of there. That each day brought some new form of psychological torture. But the nights were always the worst. I always knew when they began. The faint sound of the TV upstairs clicking off, followed by his heavy, uneven snoring seeping through the floorboards, signaled the end of another long day. After that, everything went still. That was when the thick, suffocating quiet settled in, and the isolation hit the hardest. In those moments, I felt more forgotten than ever. Though it contributed, The silence wasn't the only thing that terrified me. It was what I began to hear in that silence. Faint, little noises seemed to come from all around me. Soft scratches persisted into the night, followed by faint, dragging sounds, like something sharp scraping against wood at first. I thought I was imagining it. I figured he had finally broken me, and I had fully gone insane. But the longer I listened, the clearer they became. I realized the noises weren't coming from my head. They were coming from inside the walls. I didn't dare speak at first, afraid that he would hear me and punish me again. But eventually, the constant scraping wore me down. I couldn't take it any longer. I had to know what it was. Who's there? I whispered, listening closely for a response. There was no answer. Nothing but the same relentless noise persisted. Over the next few days, the scratching continued, steady and desperate, like someone was trying to claw their way toward me from the other side. The noises sparked my curiosity, but more importantly, they gave me a fragile sliver of hope. I thought that maybe something else was trapped in here, just like me, trying so desperately to escape. It gave me the courage I needed to push on. I had to know what was happening. I had to know what or who was behind that wall. It felt like an eternity before light crept under the door once more. It was him, but this time there was something different in the way he moved. I could hear the faint clink of the keys as he made his way to the door, followed by the slow, deliberate turn of the lock. When he stepped inside, I noticed something I had never seen in him before. There was a wild gleam in his eyes, sharp with a sort of feverish hunger. "You're getting weaker," he said, standing over me, scanning me like a piece of meat. It's time we had a real conversation. I wanted to speak, but my throat was dry, parched from nearly a full day without water. My body hung heavy against the chains, the metal biting into my wrists just enough to remind me that I was still alive. I was exhausted. He crouched down in front of me, bringing his face closer to mine until I could feel his breath against my skin. "You've been hearing things, haven't you?" he asked, grinning like a child. My gaze flicked toward the wall before I could stop it, trying to dismiss the question, but he caught it. He let out a low, satisfied chuckle. "Don't worry about them," he said, as if my fears were inconsequential. "They're like you. Well, they were once, but they didn't learn their place." A shudder tore through me. Each one of his words landed like heavy punches against my skull. He raised his hand and brushed my hair back, his touch light and gentle, but I could feel the icy malevolence beneath it. His fingers lingered a little too long, too possessively. The contact slithered under my skin, making it twitch and crawl, desperate to tear itself away from his touch. "Now," he whispered, his breath warm and wet against my ear. "I'm going to let you in on a little secret, Emily." My heart skipped a beat. I felt like I knew exactly what he was going to say next, but I wasn't fully prepared for him to. "You're not the only one down here," he said, smiling ear to ear. "There are more, and let me tell you, they are very interested in you. You are all they've been able to talk about for the last few days." He chuckled, as if he were telling me some sarcastic joke, but I wasn't laughing. "Don't worry. You'll meet them soon enough," he continued. "I just need to make sure you're ready." I felt sick. I wanted to scream in his face, but my body was too weak. I began to shake violently as I finally managed to force out a few broken words. "No, please," I begged, trying to plead to the glimpse of humanity I had seen in him that first day. He smiled at the fear in my voice, then clicked his tongue. "Tisk tisk tsk, you'll understand soon. You'll all understand." He stood up abruptly and pivoted toward the door. He grabbed the old brass handle and pulled it open, quickly slipping back into the hallway. Before he fully closed the door, he turned back to look at me one last time, smiling wide as ever. "Don't worry, Emily," he said in a low, predatory rasp. "You'll be fine. Just not be good for me." With that, the door slammed shut, leaving me alone with the sounds of scratching still emanating from the walls. 3 days later, or what I thought was 3 days, I was losing track of everything. Days bled into one another, while hours seemed to pass like minutes. Got the hunger still gnawed at me, but it was no longer the worst thing. Now, the waiting had become my greatest enemy. Dread hung in the air like static, gnawing at my senses. The feeling of something terrible, lurking just out of sight, remained ever present in my mind. It grew worse every time the door opened. I never knew who or what might appear. Most of the time, it was him. But one day, it wasn't, it was someone else. That morning was calmer than usual. I hadn't heard the usual commotion upstairs or in the hallway. I thought that he had finally grown tired of tormenting me and had left me to die. Was deep into my own self-pity when I heard footsteps approaching. I pressed myself against the wall, bracing for the worst. When the door finally opened, it wasn't his silhouette that filled the frame. It was a woman. She looked almost as pale as I felt. Her eyes were wide and frantic. Her hair was tangled and matted against her forehead as if she hadn't seen a shower in months. She looked like someone who had been here far too long. She stared at me with a desperate intensity, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. After an agonizingly awkward few seconds, she spoke. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. The words barely escaped her throat, as if speaking them cost her more strength than she had. I nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. I had no idea who she was, or how long she'd been down here, but I could feel the bond instantly. There was this unspoken connection between us. We both shared an understanding of the horrors this place contained. I heard you before," she said, her voice a whisper. "The scratching. I thought that maybe it was you." I tried to answer back. My mind was fried. I had no idea what was going on. I could barely connect one thought to the next, but I knew this was not some strange coincidence. The scratching, the extended time he had left me alone, this strange woman in front of me, it was all connected in some weird way. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "What's going on here?" I asked nervously. "What's that sound in the walls?" She took a deep, shaky breath, glancing over her shoulder with a nervous pause, as if she expected him to appear at any moment. "Others," she whispered, "like us. Except they didn't learn fast enough." I felt my stomach tighten. How long have you been here?" I asked, trying my best to remain quiet. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "Too long. Too fucking long," she said in a bitter tone. I don't even know what month it is anymore. I wanted to ask her more. I wanted to know everything. But before I could speak another word, those familiar, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Her face drained of color as she quickly ducked back into the hallway, yanking the door closed behind her. She hadn't gotten far before he had caught her in the hallway. I couldn't see it, but I could hear him scolding her. A barrage of curses and screams filled the room, thankfully muffled by the thickness of the wood and brick. After a few tense moments, the door creaked open again, and this time he was the one who stepped in. He didn't speak a word. He just stood there staring at me. After a while, he reached in and grabbed the door handle, never letting his eyes leave mine. A twisted smile slowly spread across his face as he pulled the door shut, leaving me alone once more. The days dragged on like years. Time became a cruel, meaningless construct, stretching and blurring, until it was impossible to remember how long it had been since I last spoke to anyone. Even the memory of his voice had begun to fade, slipping away like everything else. He'd begun leaving me alone more often, but never in a way that felt like relief or mercy. Each day, the rusted doors next to me would screech open, revealing a dumbwaiter he'd built into the wall. Every morning, it shuddered to life, its wooden frame rattling as it crept downward from whatever hellscape lay above me. It always stopped short with a dull thud, shaking violently as the doors rattled. Inside, there would be a single bottle of water, sometimes only half full, along with a plate of scraps, seemingly from whatever he hadn't finished from his dinner the night prior. Once the contents were removed, the doors would close, and the wooden frame would jolt upward, swallowed by the shadows between the walls. The silence that followed mealtime was worse than his presence. Every slow groan of the house above me, every uneven drip from the ceiling, it all felt like the breath before a scream. My nerves stayed wound so tight that the only thing I could hear amongst the oppressive silence was the quick, desperate thumping of my heartbeat in my ears. The woman I'd met in the hallway was still there. I could hear her sometimes, her soft footsteps drifting through the corridors like something half alive, half forgotten, performing whatever menial tasks he had bound her to. I often wondered why she hadn't tried to escape. What was so special about her that he let her walk around unshackled? I didn't know it at the time, but I wouldn't have to wait long to get answers. I'd just woken up and once again settled into my little corner of hell for the day, praying that the man would forget about me, hoping he'd slip up and leave the door unlocked just once. To my dismay, the chains remained, the floor beneath me feeling more like a grave than a prison with each passing day dot. It had become much harder to remember who I was, or even who I used to be. The girl who could walk down the street without looking over her shoulder, who had a good life full of happiness and freedom, was now just a thing to him. A broken doll, something he could project all of his dark fantasies onto Dot in the middle of my loathing and self-pity. I heard a series of knocks reverberating through the room. Each one was slow and deliberate, as if the person behind them wanted to make sure I heard and acknowledged them all. They were followed by a silence that seemed gentler, kinder than I was used to. Like the last words you hear from your mother before drifting off to sleep. I had almost tricked myself into believing this would be something different, something better than what I had known it to be. But the belief quickly faded. The gentle caress of that thought was replaced by the same low chuckle that I knew so well. Rising from behind the door Dot, my heart dropped as I began fighting the urge to tremble in fear. He need not have spoken to strike fear into me at that point. I watched as his dark shadow appeared from behind the wooden door. "Time to play, Emily," he said as he stepped inside the room with me. I closed my eyes, trying to tame the silent storm raging within my head. His words stung, but there was no use in fighting. Not anymore. There was no way out of this. I had barely eaten anything over the last few days, and my body was growing weaker. I knew I would have to sit there and take it, or risk him hurting me even worse. I could feel the edges of my sanity slipping as he inched closer. I pulled together what mental strength I had left, readying myself for whatever he had planned Dot as he made his way toward me through the dim light. I could see that he wasn't alone this time. A woman was with him, the same one I had spoken to before. Her eyes were wide and frantic. She didn't even look at me as she stepped into the room behind him, choosing instead to stare at the walls around me. She was silent, not showing any outward emotion, but I could see it in her face. She was terrified. The closer they both got to me, the more violently her body shook, as if I were the source of her fear. "What's happening?" I whispered, barely able to speak above the lump in my throat. "What's going on?" He pushed the woman toward me, and she stumbled, falling to her knees before me. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked up at me. I could see that she was already covered in bruises, and her clothes were horribly torn and stained. Her face was gaunt, hollowed by exhaustion and fear. She didn't look like the same person I'd seen days before. "Emily," she rasped, her voice cracking. He's changing things. Things are different now. She cut herself off, her breath coming in quick, ragged gasps. The tears that she had been holding back started to flow down her cheeks, as if she were finally releasing the pain she'd been carrying for so long. I reached for her, desperate to know what was going on, desperate to help her, but she recoiled from my touch. Fear exploding in her eyes, double quotes, no, don't touch me, she whispered frantically. Please, you don't understand. Before she could finish, he took a step toward me and pressed his hand down on my shoulder. I felt his cold, hard grip squeezing tighter, setting the tone before he even said a word. Once he had satisfied his sick, twisted lust for control, he crouched down beside me. He spoke with a soft, almost gentle tone as he leaned in, his breath hot against my ear. Well, now look what we have here, he said, his voice smooth and mocking. You've made a new friend, Emily. That's good. You'll need all the friends you can get for your next phase. His smooth, icy words melted across my mind, settling into panic. My heart pounded in my chest, flooding my body with adrenaline. I jerked my head away from him, desperate to put as much distance between us as possible. What are you talking about? I asked, voice shaking. Why are you doing this to us? Please, just let us go. He laughed in a harsh, grating rasp, like fingernails scraping across a blackboard. You don't understand, he said, his voice slipping into a near whisper. You'll never understand. You don't know how it feels. How good it feels to break someone down to nothing. To make them beg. To make them need you. I flinched as his hand tightened further on my shoulder, his fingers digging deep into my skin. Soon, you'll get it. And when you do, you'll be just like her. You'll be begging me to help you, begging me to make you better. Oh, what a beautiful day that will be. He turned to the woman then, as though I were nothing more than a shadow in the room. Take her to meet Lilith, he said coldly. It's time for her next lesson. The woman didn't move at first. She just stared at the floor, hollow-eyed and empty, as if she were already somewhere far away, lost within herself. Then, slowly she rose, unsteadily climbing to her feet, her body swaying from fatigue and stress. Her eyes remained fixed ahead, rigid and vacant, desperately avoiding my gaze. In that moment, I was torn between two things that scared me senseless. The first was her. She had been changed completely, which frightened me almost as much as he did. She wasn't just broken. She had been altered. I didn't even recognize her anymore. The second thing was what hit me the hardest, sinking deep into my consciousness like a needle. I could feel the unease growing as a strange, knowing certainty washed over me, telling me that whatever was coming next would not be as pleasant as the torment I'd already endured. This felt different. He'd had enough of trying to break me down. He was preparing me for something darker, something worse that I didn't understand yet, but could already feel reaching out for me. He reached down for my right hand, yanking it toward him until the chain rattled tight. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, silver key, and unlocked the shackle. My heart fluttered as it clattered to the floor. This was what I'd been waiting for. I knew this was my chance to get out of this place. The instant my wrist came free, I jerked my hand back and lunged at him, frantically swinging for anything I could hit, hoping it would hurt him enough for me to escape. He snapped backward and away from my fist before quickly raising his hand and bringing it crashing down across my face, snapping my head back against the wall. My body fell limp, and my vision briefly faded as the world spun around me. Through the haze, I rolled my head back around, catching his gaze by mistake. See? He said calmly through gritted teeth. This is why you need another lesson. You're just not ready yet. I barely felt him release the shackle on my other wrist before a sharp, mechanical sound clicked in my ear. I felt a cold sting close around my wrists as he fastened handcuffs in place of the shackles. Once he finished tightening the cuffs, he grabbed my chin and jerked my head upward, forcing me to look at him. He stared deep into my eyes, giving me one last, chilling smile before saying, "Enjoy your lesson, Emily." He stood up and walked out of the room without saying another word, the door clicking shut behind him. For a few seconds, I just sat there, dizzy and disoriented, scrambling to make sense of what was going on. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I was running out of time. I heard the woman move, slowly shuffling toward me. Her hands trembled as she reached for me, but her grip was surprisingly strong. She didn't speak or even look me in the eyes as she stood me upright. My legs wobbled beneath me. I was dazed, weak, and broken, barely able to even stand on my own without her assistance. She steadied me in place and without hesitation, gently pushed me forward. She held one hand against the small of my back and the other one clutching the chain on my handcuffs. She'd take a step and then pull me along behind her like a dog on a leash, each movement stiff and mechanical, as if she weren't even aware of what she was doing. I staggered along behind her, my body paralyzed with fear. We stepped into the hallway outside the room, and she led me toward a narrow door at the far end. When she opened it, a rush of cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of sweat and long-forgotten torment. Beyond the doorway lay a sub-basement that descended into what felt like some alien underworld. The stairs leading down were steep and uneven, each step groaning under our combined weight. The deeper we descended, the worse everything felt. The corridor stretched into darkness, long and quiet, like a predator closing in. Finally, we reached the bottom, where another door stood. Before I could even examine it, the woman reached out and turned the handle. The door to the room opened with a loud groan, twisting my stomach into knots. As I was guided across the threshold, I scanned the space thoroughly, the truth hitting me almost immediately. This wasn't a room at all. It was a cage. The floor was made of slick, uneven concrete stained with remnants of something I couldn't identify. Chains and hooks jutted from the walls at odd angles, shadows pooling beneath them. A single dim light flickered overhead, casting the room in a sickening orange glow that barely reached the walls. Cold, blackened metal bars stretched from floor to ceiling, enclosing a space barely large enough for a single person. Inside the bars lay another woman, bloodied, bruised, naked, and curled up in a ball. She didn't move when we entered, but her eyes were wide open, staring into the blackness. They were empty, as if she had been stripped of her own soul. I could feel her despair radiating from her. "Go ahead," the woman said to me, her voice distant. "He says you have to meet her, and then you'll be ready." "Meet her?" I whispered, hoping the woman behind the bars couldn't hear me. I took a step back, but the woman behind me grabbed the chain on the cuffs and forced me forward. "He says you have to know. You have to know what happens when you don't learn quickly enough. He just wants you to obey." The woman's voice trembled. I could feel her hands shaking through the metal of the handcuffs. "Please, don't make the same mistake I did." The cage creaked as the woman inside it shifted. She looked up at me with blank eyes, her expression unreadable, like a shell of a person who'd once been. "Please," I whispered, choking on the words. "Please don't put me in there." She didn't answer. She just kept pulling me toward the cage, following her orders. That's when it all hit me. I finally accepted the truth that I had tried so hard to deny. She was never going to help me die. She was just another victim, another piece of his twisted puzzle, and I was just one more name on the list of broken people who had learned the hard way. I am 65 years old, and I separated from my husband 5 years ago. My ex-husband left me a bank card with an amount of $30,000 that, I never used after 5 years when I went to withdraw the money. I froze in my place because of what I saw. Beginning of the story was after 37 years of marriage. The man I shared most of my life with abandoned me on. The day of the divorce, my ex-husband handed me a bank card and said calmly, "It has 30,000. It will be enough for you for a few months." He said it as if those 37 years we spent together were worth only this amount, as if I was an old, useless thing. I watched him turn around and leave the family court. Without looking back, I felt a lump in my throat that almost suffocated me. Kept the card not because I needed it, but because it was like a thorn in my heart. After the divorce, I lived in a small room on the edge of the city. I survived and worked doing everything I could, cleaning houses and collecting plastic bottles from the street. Those were the hardest years of my life. Many times I suffered from hunger, many nights I slept while hungry, but I never touched that bank card with the 30,000. Not because I was proud, but because I did not want to touch something that felt like charity. I hated that cardie, hated the feeling of abandonment, hated the feeling that after a long life, I was just a burden. Time passed slowly like a dull knife, cutting slowly but deeply. My body aged quickly. There were days when getting out of bed was a hard battle. My children visited me from time to time and left me some money, but each of them had their own family. Never told them about my pain or dizziness. I did not want to be another source of worry until that day I fainted in front of my room door. People took me to the hospital. The doctor was clear: severe malnutrition. You need treatment, hospital admission. I knew I had no choice. For the first time in 5 years, I thought about that card. There is only 30,000, but it will help me. For a few days the next morning, I went to the bank. My hands were shaking as I handed the card to the young employee. "I want to withdraw the full amount, please, from this cardie." Imagine myself leaving with some cash, returning to my miserable life. The girl stared at the screen for a long time. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were full of shock. "Madam, the balance is not 30,000. My heart jumped. Then, "How much is it?" She printed the statement and pushed it toward me. Looked at the paper and felt as if the world had stopped. What I saw took my breath away. The balance was 430,000. I thought my eyes were lying to me. Asked her to check again. She typed again and turned the screen toward me. Same number was there. My knees weakened, and I held the counter so I would not fall. I asked her quietly, "How is this possible?" She said, "The account has been receiving monthly deposits for 5 years, the same amount every month, with interest added." I felt my chest tighten. I knew that amount. It was exactly what my ex-husband used to spend on himself every month. I realized he had been sending money silently, without telling anyone. Not to control me and not to humiliate me, but to make sure I survived. Tears fell from my eyes. Without permission, all those years I thought I was abandoned, but he was watching from a distance, paying. Without words, I withdrew only a small amount. I left the rest untouched. I paid for my treatment and food. I rented a small, clean place for the first time in years. I slept without hunger. Weeks later, I received a call from the hospital. They told me someone had paid the rest of my medical bills. They would not tell me the name, but I knew I never went back to confront him. I did not need answers anymore. That card that once felt like a wound became proof that life is not always what it seems. Sometimes pride hides help, sometimes silence carries care, and sometimes what freezes us in places, not horror, but an unexpected mercy. I thought the story had ended there, but life was not finished with me yet. Days passed and my strength slowly returned. I began to walk longer distances. I felt my hands stop shaking. I felt hunger leave my body for the first time in years. One afternoon, while cleaning the small room I rented, I found an old notebook. Inside it were notes I had written years ago. Dreams. I once had simple dreams. A small garden. A quiet life. Bread on the table without fear. I realized how much of myself I had buried to survive. I Went back to the bank a month later, not to withdraw money, but to ask a question that burned inside me. The employee checked the account again. She told me the deposits were still coming every single month, like a heartbeat regular silent asterisk. I asked if there was a message attached. She shook her head. Only a name. On the sender line, his name, I walked out into the street asterisk. The sun felt different on my skin. I was angry, relieved, confused, all at the same time asterisk that night. I could not sleep. Memories flooded me, arguments, silences, years of distance living under the same roof. I realized we were both proud. Too proud to speak, too wounded to explain. Weeks later, I decided to write a letter. Not to accuse, not to thank, just to speak. I wrote that I survived, that I forgave, that I finally understood asterisk. I did not ask him to stop sending the money. I did not ask him to see me. I only asked him to live in peace asterisk. I never knew if he received the letter. He never replied. But 1 month later, the deposit increased slightly. I smiled through tears. I started helping other women in the neighborhood, women like me, abandoned, invisible. I cooked for them, listened to their stories, shared my story, not the money, but the strength. Years passed. My hair turned completely white. My back bent more, but my heart became lighter asterisk. One morning, I woke up with pain in my chest. I knew it was serious at the hospital. I was calm. I had no fear. I had eaten asterisk. I had been loved in silence asterisk. I asked the nurse to bring my bag inside. Was the bank card worn? Scratched still. There asterisk. I held it and closed my eyes, not as a symbol of pain anymore, but as proof that even broken endings can hide mercy. If someone reads my story, know this asterisk. Sometimes help comes without words. Sometimes love arrives too late to fix the past, but just in time to save a soul. I thought that was the last chapter asterisk, but destiny still held one final turn asterisk. Months later, while sitting near the window, watching people pass asterisk, a knock came at my door, a slow, hesitant knock. When I opened it, my breath stopped. He stood there, older, thinner, quieter asterisk. His eyes carried the same sadness I had carried for years asterisk. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Silence filled the room, heavier than words. He finally said my name, just my name, and my knees trembled asterisk. He told me he had received the letter. He said he never knew how to face me, that leaving was the greatest cowardice of his life asterisk, that every month he sent the money, hoping it would erase a little of his guilt asterisk, but guilt never left asterisk. He said he followed my life from afar asterisk, asked about me, waited for news. When he heard I was hospitalized, he almost collapsed asterisk. That was when he decided to come asterisk, not to ask forgiveness, but to see if I was alive. We sat, two strangers bound by decades. He cried. I cried, not loudly, but deeply, the kind of crying that cleans wounds. He said he was sick, that his heart was failing, that time was short. He asked nothing from me, not care, not love asterisk, not even a place to stay. He only said, thank you for surviving. Thank you for forgiving me without words asterisk days. Later he was gone quietly, like he lived the last years of his life asterisk. The bank deposits stopped, but I did not feel fear. I did not feel anger. I felt peace. I used the remaining money wisely. I lived simply, helping, listening, smiling when my time came. I was not alone. I was full, not of money asterisk, but of understanding asterisk, that life does not always break us to punish us asterisk. Sometimes it breaks us to teach us mercy asterisk. And sometimes what looks like abandonment asterisk is love hiding behind silence. I believed that was truly the end, but stories like mine do not end suddenly. They fade slowly, like a long sunset asterisk after his passing. I kept living quietly. I woke up early. I watered the small plants by my window. I cooked simple meals I laughed with. The women who came to sit with me, they called me mother. They did not know my past asterisk. They only knew my kindness asterisk, sometimes at night. I held the old bank card, not to remember the money, but to remember the lesson that pride can starve a soul, and silence can still carry years later. My body grew weaker. Walking became harder, breathing heavier. But my heart was calm. I had no unfinished anger, no words left unsaid. One winter morning I felt tired in a different way. Deep, peaceful tiredness. I lay down and looked at the light coming through the window. I thought of my youth, of love, of loss, of survival, of mercy that arrived late, but arrived when they found me. I was smiling. The card was in my hand, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that even in abandonment, humanity can survive. If my story reaches someone broken, someone hungry, someone proud and alone, remember this. Do not confuse silence with absence. Do not reject help because it arrives quietly, and never believe that your life is worth a number, because even after decades of pain, life can still surprise you with mercy. And even after that, my story did not disappear, it traveled. The women who sat with me told it to their daughters. The daughters told it to friends, not as gossip, but as a warning and a hope. They spoke about a woman who survived hunger with dignity, about a heart that refused bitterness, about mercy that came late but changed everything. One day, a young nurse wrote my words in a notebook. She said she never wanted to forget Mesh, said my story reminded her to be gentle. Years passed, and my room was given to another tired soul. My plants were moved to the window of the hallway, still growing, still alive. Sometimes life does not give us loud apologies. Sometimes it gives us quiet payments, silent sacrifices, invisible love. And if you ever stand in front of a screen, heart racing, hands shaking, afraid of what you might see, remember me, because what froze me in my place that day was not loss, it was the proof that even after everything, I was never truly